Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. Today we come together to talk about the brand new set Innistrad Midnight Hunt, which is dropping here momentarily. On this channel we tend to look at new sets from a budget perspective. There are plenty of other channels that can tell you that rares and mythics are good, as if you needed anyone to tell you that. But here we're going to focus on those budget-centric cards, our budget decks, and how to get the most value out of this set without burning all of our time, money, and wild cards to do it. But before we get into all that, allow me to take a moment. We made it to our first spoken goal, folks. We've hit 100 subs on the channel. And I think nothing celebrates a milestone like talking about the next goal. And I read somewhere in educating myself about YouTube that the time it takes you to go from 0 to 100 subs is the same amount of time that it will take you to go from 100 to 1,000. So we're about a year into, well, frankly, taking the channel seriously at any level. So my next goal is to hit 1,000 subs within the year. By September 2022. And I know I can't do it without you. You see, we're not one of those huge channels out there. Around here, you matter. And that's why I want to take this moment and say thank you to all the folks you see here on your screen who not only supported us and helped us get to this goal of 100 subs, but have also chosen to make their subscription public. You see, what a lot of you don't realize is that the YouTube algorithm doesn't really support channels like this. For whatever reason, they don't push content designed for new players, free-to-play players, or budget players. And I would like to reteach the algorithm. I would like to teach them that this content is relevant and that our audience and our community matters. And while I know I can't do that, I think we can. So with that in mind, in addition to the usual like, comment, and subscribe that I'm sure you hear all the time from YouTube channels, there's two special things I would like you to do in order to help us grow the channel. The first off is, if you are finding value in this content, share it out to your social media platforms so that your friends, family, colleagues, whatever, can find that same value in what we're doing as Innistrad is getting ready to release and allow the video to play all the way to the end. Official new, because if you just click into the video, let's take a moment, the deck list, and then click back out. You might be giving YouTube the impression that you didn't like the video, and that's less likely to push it out. Eastwood grid. So do me the favor, push it out to your social media, watch it to the end, and let's send a positive message for our budget community, followed by black-green +1 counters. What were we talking about? Mono red goblins, black-red treasures, and green-white life matters. These are the decks we want to be using the most to complete our quests each day, and developing decks that will have a 50% or higher win rate. Now let's talk about the quote-unquote bad category, or the decks that have potential but need some development. Here we've got a mono-green Stompy. We have our red-white equipment / warriors deck, our mono-white All About That Life deck. The black-blue has yet to really develop an identity beyond control deck, and then our black-white Dungeon Delver deck. And then the decks that we're pretty much not worried about at the moment, we have mono black random cards. Blue, red, I haven't developed an identity yet because I might be a tribal giant deck or I might not. Then we have blue, green, Snowlands Matter, and that's followed up by blue, white, control-ish, play cards not from your hand deck. And then lastly, we have mono blue cards. Really don't know anything else to say about that deck. And now let's talk about Midnight Hunt from a mechanical standpoint. And really, I think the most impactful mechanic that we're going to see a lot of right from day one is the day-night mechanic, where cards change and function differently depending upon whether it's day or night. And as you can see on the screen, this all has to do with how many spells have been cast in the turn prior, whether it becomes day or becomes night or stays the way it is. I'm sure you guys can read this on the screen. I'm sure you've heard about it to death up to this point, but I think this is one of the really interesting mechanics, and I think it's the one that we're most likely to maybe see in some other sets. Most likely the second Innistrad set coming out here in a few months, but potentially in some other sets this year as well, even if it's just one or two of cards that play into this mechanic. Our second mechanic, Coven, unfortunately I think is the weakest and has the lowest possibility of the three. Coven requires you to have requires you to have 3 creatures with different powers. So it is not only difficult and inconsistent, but it's very easy for your opponent to disrupt because removal is a thing. Our second mechanic, Coven, unfortunately I think is the weakest and has the lowest possibility of the 3. Coven requires you to have requires you to have 3 creatures with different powers. So it is not only difficult and inconsistent, but it's very easy for your opponent to disrupt because removal is a thing. And lastly, I think the most interesting mechanic for this particular set is the graveyard mechanic, Disturbed, which allows you to replay a card from your graveyard by paying its disturbed cost, but it changes the card mechanically. So in essence, you're playing a second card when you play it for its disturbed cost, and when it dies the second time, it is exiled and just goes away. The reason I think this is so compelling is because not only is it a graveyard mechanic, not only does it give you different creatures the second time around, but it also plays very nicely with the the blue-white deck that we have in our collection that wants you to cast spells from places other than your hand. Is it good enough to make that deck good? Probably not, but it may elevate it into that yellow, the bad sector, where we are giving it a little more thought and potentially developing it into a good deck. All right, so before we jump into our top 5 budget considerations for Midnight Hunt, I've got a couple honorable mentions for you. The first is Sunrise Cavalier. A Boros colored 3 mana 3/3 with trample and haste. If it's neither day or night, it becomes day when it enters the battlefield. Whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, put a +1 counter on target creature you control. This is a very powerful card, but unfortunately it doesn't really have a home in any of our budget decks at the moment, and I don't think it's getting enough support yet to kind of birth a deck of its own. The main reason I'm talking about it today beyond its power level, though, is it is a knight, and if you were around for Budget Season 3 just last year, we had a red-white knight deck, and this fits very nicely into this. So you may want to pick up a copy or two while you have the chance, if for no other reason than to use them in your historic deck. Next up for your consideration as an honorable mention is Storm Skreelix. As a blue-red Spells Matters card, this one is really starting to try and bring that deck together that we have seen on Arena over so many periods of time. Really, both seasons 1, 2, and 3 had a version of blue-red Spells Matter, and this card is trying to bring it back. It has the things that we look at or look for: a decent body. It flies. It makes your instants and sorceries cheaper. It pumps this creature every time you cast one of those instants or sorceries. It's really everything that we're looking for, except it's a mana cost of 5. And this deck really doesn't want to be bringing its Signpost uncommon together on turn 5. So this deck is still missing a little bit, but it is on the cusp of relevance. Blue-red may become relevant. Dragons, in my opinion, is just not getting there yet. And now let's kick off those top 5 budget considerations for Midnight Hunt with the black-white Flesh Taker, Human Assassin, 2 mana, and it's a 2/2. This one is really trying to bring about that aristocrat style, sacrifice your creatures for profit style deck. I'm not sure that this is good enough to put it in the good category, but it definitely has more upside potential than the black-white Delver deck that we're looking at right now. So I would say go ahead and pick these up where you can, because more than likely this is the direction we will go with black-white, at least as far as we stand right now. So next up we have Grizzly Ghoul, and while this does not create a deck in and of itself, we can't ignore just how well it fits into our green-black +1 counters matters deck. This is probably not going to do much other than replace other cards, but a 4/3 for 4 that enters the battlefield with a +1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn has the potential to be a great late game card and is probably a 2 or 3 of. It also has tramples, so it allows you to really break up that board state. So a card we will definitely be snatching up and using in that deck. Now we have one of those rare times where I talk about a common card in one of our new set budget perspective videos. I present to you the Lunarch Veteran. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So it fits very nicely into either of our life gain matters decks, be it the mono white or the white green. It also has Disturb, so it has the potential to fit nicely into our white blue don't cast spells from your hand deck. And of course, when you cast it for its Disturb cost, it becomes a 1/1 flyer. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, you gain 1 life. And of course, it exiles when it's dead, and it's also a flyer in its second iteration. So a lot of good potential here with this card. You really don't have to worry much about getting a playset of commons, but you may want to be on the lookout for these as those first or second common picks when you have choices to be made. Moment of truth here time, guys. The first time I compiled this video, I completely left out Bladestitched Skaab, which is completely insane because this is our zombies deck that we've been waiting for. The new mechanic decay I think they have placed in this set to try and keep zombies under control, and I'm not sure they achieved what they were looking for. I think zombies may still really be busted, and I think it is definitely a more budget friendly than the blue-black control deck that we have already tried to upgrade and basically failed. This is the direction for blue-black. And in fact, honestly, I think this is going to be mostly a black deck with a splash of blue for lords. So we may give up on mono black altogether unless a unique mono black strategy emerges during the year. And at our number 2 budget consideration for Midnight Hunt, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Great Blue Hope. We've talked on several occasions about how our blue new player experience collection is really a little lackluster and just doesn't get there. But they have given us Delver of Secrets in Midnight Hope. For 1 blue mana, you get a 1/1 human wizard that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card. If an instant or sorcery card is revealed in this way, transform a Delver of Secrets. It becomes a 3/2 flying human insect. So not only is this very powerful as a standalone card, but it fits very nicely into a potential mono blue or blue white flyers deck, which has yet to develop yet for this season. It also fits very nicely into that potential blue-red spells matter deck because you want to be able to flip into that instant or sorcery, and that seems to be one of the easiest ways to do it. Grab up these copies of these cards. You're going to want them in your collection. This is going to be a powerhouse card, not only for this season, but probably for the next 2 years. And at number 1, let's talk about Devoted Graphkeeper. At a white and blue, it gives you a 2/1 human peasant. I'm not sure that's a creature type we've ever seen before. When Devoted Graphkeeper enters the battlefield, mill 2 cards. That's right, this puts more cards into your graveyard for you in a deck potentially built around Disturbed. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, tap target creature you don't control. That's right, then it also rewards you for casting cards from your graveyard. And if that's not enough, it has a Disturb cost of its own, allowing you to bring a Departed Soulkeeper, a 3/1 flying spirit creature, onto the battlefield. Departed Soulkeeper can block only creatures with flying, but that's okay because it's probably developing into a semi-aggro deck. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it, just like all of the Disturbed cards we have looked at. This is not a fantastic card in the sense that it will create a new deck for us. It is a fantastic card because it, along with our number 2 and number 3 pick, all fit very nicely potentially into that blue-white Vegas deck that wants you to Vegas the creature, not Vegas the city. But it wants you to cast creatures from places other than your hands. And these Disturbed creatures that are a little pushed and a little beyond curve do that very nicely and fill a lot of potential roles in a deck like that. Haha, I bet I got you there. The most important, number 0, even more important than number 1 reason to be interested in this set from a budget perspective is Kessig. This set is all about werewolves, and this is an uncommon werewolf lord. And it's a shining example of why we don't use our wild cards to invest in our budget decks for the standard season. Because you remember, so far this season, we have done nothing but rave about how good the red-green deck is, but here is a completely different deck coming out of the very next set. Werewolves has the potential to outshine the red-green landfall deck that we have been so big on. So if we had invested a bunch of wild cards into that red-green landfall deck, they might just be gone. Now, which one's the better deck? Honestly, I'm not sure yet, but they both have real solid potential. So I think this is a matter of what direction your individual collection takes you. Obviously, we already have a highly functioning landfall deck, so that is sunk cost, and it's good. It's worth playing. The werewolves deck for red-green is something we're going to need to build up over time, and depending upon how your collection develops, it definitely has a longer potential because it will be in standard for the next 2 years. So this is where it's at right here, guys, the werewolves. So there it is, guys. There is our Halloween themed and timed spooky set for the fall. I think it's a good set. We're definitely going to be having this in standard for the next 2 years as sets rotate around it. I think there is a lot of potential in this set, but I also think we have time to build our collections and we don't need to be in a huge rush. If you're doing daily play, you are essentially amassing enough gold every week to do 2.2 drafts. Here, I really think when it comes to Midnight Hunt, we want to be doing one of those drafts and banking the gold for sets that are doing more for our collection in the short term. Right now, I think Zendikar, Strixhaven, and the D&D inspired set are all doing more for our collections than Midnight Hunt is right now. So do a Midnight Hunt draft, save all the packs that you accumulate to open later, and bank the gold to draft sets that are doing more for you in the short term. All right, so with all that having been said, don't forget, smash the like button like Hulk would. And of course, comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And one last thing, myself, I'm coming to you from America, and I have noticed that about 1/3 of my viewership is coming from the US, and about 1/3 is coming from various countries. And there's about 1/3 of my viewership that is just getting lumped into other. So to let me know you got to the end of the video, throw me a comment down in there and let me know where you are watching from.